welcome back to the Future of Figure Skating. I'm your host, Anna Keller, and on this episode, I talked with choreographer, director, and producer Sandra Bezic. With her brother Val, Sandra was a four-time Canadian pairs champion and competed in the 1972 Olympics. She's most well known, however, as a choreographer and the creative force behind many skating shows and TV programs. She's choreographed for champions like Brian Boitano, Kurt Browning, Katarina Witt, Chen, and Tara Lipinski. Most recently, she made Lindsay Thorngren's short program for the 23-24 season. She was the director of Stars on Ice for many years and collaborated with David Wilson on Yuna Kim's All That Skate and Javier Fernandez's Revolution on Ice. Sandra also produced the Canadian TV program Battle of the Blades, and in 2023 made the series I Have Nothing alongside comedian Carolyn Taylor. Sandra has a great understanding of how to make skating appeal to general audiences, and we had a really interesting conversation about choreography, entertainment, and the changes she'd like to see in the sport. Hi, Sandra. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
My pleasure. It's a pleasure to meet you, Anna.
Me too. I've been a big admirer of your work for a long time. I was just talking to Asher Hill on our Anything GOE's recap about how I love the work that you did for Lindsay Thorngren this season.
Oh, thank you.
Wonderful her program is. So
thank you very much. Yeah, that was, well, I hadn't made a short program for anybody in a really long time. So I was really nervous about it. I didn't want to let her down, and it was daunting. And I also really gained a new appreciation. I mean, I've always appreciated all the choreographers out there, but now I've got a greater appreciation for what they go through to try and satisfy the rules.
Yeah,
and you create something fresh, right?
Yeah, definitely. How did you end up working with her?
Well, I got a call, and I think it was generated by her team, by Julia, her coach, and her parents, and maybe a little bit from USF, and just got a call requesting if just seeing if I was interested, and it was at a good time where I felt really confident, I guess, and I had the time to get in there. And what happened too was I watched her tapes immediately. I just YouTubed her as much as I could to just kind of understand where I thought she was coming from, understand what kind of skater she was. And I felt like I could contribute. I felt like I could make a difference. And I thought, okay, it's early in the season. Let's try this. And then I went down to New Jersey, and they were lovely. And Julia was wonderful. She really held my hand through it, technically. And David Wilson also on the phone. When I would have sort of questions and distress calls, and he kept me from jumping off the ledge.
Because it was with doing an IJS program and the program had many of those reasons.
Because it was so foreign to the way I think. And for example, I think in musical phrases, obviously, I know technically how to make a program. I've made competitive programs many, many times. And I also understand the order and what works for a skater and what doesn't work for a skater and that kind of timing. But I never actually thought about elements in terms of how long they take to execute. To me, it should always be generated by musical phrasing. The phrase ends there, then so should the spin. The spin shouldn't continue off into the next phrase unless you deal with it somehow. So that was basically how I was coming in. And so now the choreographers have to think in both ways. yes, this takes 25 seconds, but then, and then make sense of it with the musical phrasing. And so I was determined not to settle in that regard. If I was going to do one program by myself this year, this was going to be the goal, to actually obviously deliver a product that would work for the skater, of course, but then also to sort of satisfy my own rules.
Well, I think it really stands out, partly because of that, I think, and a big impression in terms of helping, I think, Lindsay stand out, and for the
thank you. Well, thank you. It was not the first time I'd worked with lyrics competitively, although again, the first time alone. And I also leaned into the lyrics. I just thought, they're there. Let's not pretend they aren't. And that was really, I think, helpful to our process, because the music was so empty. It was almost a cappella. And so we really worked with those as much as we could.
Yeah, and when I've only spoken briefly to Lindsay, I saw that her at the Cranberry Cup very early on in the season, and she was very excited about showing this program. But she seems a very shy and introverted person, and I was wondering, did you find that it was more challenging to sort of to draw her out into such an expressive piece of music?
Well, I think it's the choreographer's job to burrow in and read between the lines and read their bodies, their movement, and their facial expressions. And I've worked with other skaters who are quiet and reserved, and I like that. I like the diversity of personalities, for sure. And I like that, sort of following the breadcrumbs, kind of trying to figure out what's the clue, what's the magic inside this person, what's a magic, because often they have many. And so much of our conversation is physical and just watching, that it wouldn't say it's difficult. It's just unique for each person. And I try to respect who they are, and not push them in a direction where they're either not ready or where they just aren't. And people evolve, right? We all grow and we all change, and we all have different things to say in different times of our life. And so you sort of try to burrow in and figure out what's important to them at this time in their lives.
Yeah, no, that's great. It was very funny for me, because I had this very brief conversation with Lindsay right after she got off the ice, and she was saying, "Oh, my choreographer said this," and so I know, and then of course, she ran off, and I was typing up one little thing and said, okay, so she said, something about her choreographer, and I was thinking, I needed to ask her who her choreographer was. Anyway, then the next day, her coach came over to me and was like, her the choreographer. It's not just a choreographer, it's Sandra Bezic. And
that's hilarious.
But I would think they're very proud of having worked with you on it. So
well, that was very sweet. That's very sweet.
But it's I was realizing in seeing that it was thinking, oh, it's so nice to see choreography from Sandra, but that I was realizing that it really had been a while since we'd seen you do a competitive piece like that
all by myself.
Yeah.
I've paired up with David a few times, and I've let him do the heavy lifting, in terms of requirements, and just zone off. And it's way easier when you're bouncing off someone else. But this time it was different. Yeah, and it's it's really just because of where my career has gone and the time available and all of that. I mean, there's been no intention, no plan. It's just the way it's all landed.
Yeah. So at this point, do you feel like most of your time is going toward projects that you're working on as a producer or a director? How are you
Yes.
the bulk of your time these days?
Certainly the last 10, 15 years have been way more focused on creating projects and producing, and either producing or executive producing television projects, or producing or creating live and directing live projects, one-off shows or that kind of thing, or larger events. And so, I mean, that's just been the natural evolution of my career. All those years with Stars on Ice, that led into, and then also all my television experience in terms of choreographing for the camera, and then producing, and all the specials that we were so fortunate to have in Canada. And all of this, just one thing led to another. And once you they're so demanding, and it's a different brain that I use to produce and direct versus choreographing. And so that switch I find really difficult. And as a choreographer, you need to get into choreography shape. You need to, not just physically to move around on the ice, but mentally to kind of be on top of it, and for it to just come. And so when I don't do it as often, I'm just not, I feel like I'm not in mental shape. And so if somebody asks me to do something, I just require time. I need time to get in there. Because of course, back in the day when I was doing a lot of programs, it would come like that, but now I don't. So it's just, the changing of gears is really difficult for me, whatever part of the brain that you use.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then the project that I'm aware of most recently was the show that I Have Nothing that you so much fun to watch.
Did you see it?
It took I have to say, it took some creativity to watch it as with VPNs and borrowing somebody's account and a few things like that, which was a shame. I think that it was only accessible.
Yes, and hopefully it will be accessible more internationally. Fortunately, it's a show that doesn't really have a time stamp on it. It can last. So we're hoping that it'll be picked up in more places in the world. And that was such a departure for me. And the story was but it's not a skating story. It's Carolyn's story that happens to involve skating and her love for 88 and all that happened in 88. And so it was a fascinating journey for me, and as a participant in it, as an actor, also playing myself, and then also helping to produce. So it was a lot, as we said, it was a lot, but it was really a lot of fun, and I learned a ton and fell in love with the group of people, and Carolyn will be a lifelong friend.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. And I thought it was so wonderful to see somebody be that enthusiastic about skating, that it was, that she was, this is sort of partly the character that she's playing, but that she has this not knowing what the rules are, how the things need to work, but just having that pure love and joy for it. That was really a great thing to see. I was thinking that if somebody was watching it and they didn't know much about skating, that would have been a nice introduction to it, to see somebody have that energy for it.
Right. And I think that it for people who have watched skating and are fans, it's also an experience that they may have felt when they hear a piece of music. It's like, wow, somebody should skate to that. It's just Carolyn took it one step further and thought, and I should choreograph it, or she should choreograph it. Yeah. So I think that the kernel of the idea is just so charming and genuine, and she came into it with the utmost respect for the sport and for the people in the sport. And I was in a position to be able to open those doors for her and introduce her to all my friends and to our world, and everybody embraced her. It was so much fun to see, so much fun to shoot, and exciting to see her journey from this concoction in her head, this fantasy, into making this reality.
Yeah.
And with Carolyn too, she's a creator. She knows how to create. She knows what a good story is. So she already had that. So she wasn't completely green. She may not know skating or how to actually physically choreograph, but she absolutely knows how to build a story and be entertaining in that way. So, and that to me is very much an important feature of choreography.
Yeah. Yeah. That was the thing that was so interesting. I was thinking about your role sort of teaching or being this sort of ambassador or interpreter for the of skating, and that in some different ways that you've had that experience, because almost Battle of the Blades feels like it's almost coming from the other direction with people who know skating but don't have the idea of what it is to tell a story or to be expressive, and you're kind of helping them to translate that from the hockey world as well.
A different kind of journey. And with the hockey players, it was so much fun to watch them progress on their journey. Where at the beginning, they had their heels stuck in. And then for many of them, they'd say, well, I'm not wearing any sequins, and I'm not wearing that. And I always said, you can wear as many sequins or as few sequins as you want. You can wear whatever you want. You can say no to anything. This is your journey. But then as they progressed through the process, and as they began to understand the process with their choreographers and their partners, they began to really become committed to the process. And then they'd come to me and say, I want to skate to this song, and I want to wear this, and this is how I see the motivation of for the music and or for the movement. And it would be wonderful. It was so wonderful to watch this journey and for them to find that creativity within them, these big brute hockey players, and then later, of course, the female hockey players for the last couple of years. So it was, and I think the audience loved, of course, they were their favorite hockey stars, but also loved watching the human story of the journey, the exploration into creativity. And that really is the basis of the popularity of the sport, isn't it? The personalities and their stories.
Yeah, and I think that's something that it's interesting when hockey gets held up as sort of the antithesis to figure skating, both in the sense that they're the ones, maybe you're competing for the ice time with, or, there's a push and pull between that. But also I often hear people talk about as almost a proxy for, I did something really impressive and even the hockey player that was watching from the side was impressed. And, think about like, who are we, that
was our stamp of approval.
Are valuable to the sport as a sport and everything to the hockey players. I like the idea that the hockey players might have to, try to come out of their shells and prove themselves to the figure skaters.
Yes, they were the vulnerable ones, and how brave of them to allow themselves at this point in their careers too. They're all stars. They had no good reason to do this other than the charitable aspect and just the idea of going through this experience to see what it would mean to them and what they could learn putting themselves in a vulnerable situation. So I'm hugely respectful of their bravery.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. What did you feel like, from doing these things where you're sort of pulling people from outside of the skating world into the skating world and bringing it to them? What do you feel like that has taught you about what makes skating appealing or
Yeah. Well, it's something that I've observed in different ways almost through my whole career, where an outsider, a so-called outsider, has come in and actually stood or sat and watched in person and been blown away by what the skaters do, who the skaters are, their strength, their courage, their bravery, their vulnerability, all of that is skating, that can be skating. And whether it's a fellow commentator like the host, like Tom Hammond, or remember when Doc Emmerich came in to substitute for Tom, I think, one year because Tom wasn't available. And he had never seen figure skating before. And there he was commentating, and he was completely blown away. And so by the people, by what they do, by the moment, by the grandeur, by the vulnerability of that single person on the ice. And so over and over again, I've witnessed this. And I think that is the core of who we are, that our sense of flight, are maybe not are anymore. There, I put myself in that as a skater, but I'm not that anymore. Their courage, it is extraordinary, and that is what is so captivating in our sport, I think.
Yeah.
And there, the other thing too is just that it may be less so now because of the rules, which is why I take issue with the rules. But anybody can do it in terms of physically, there's something for everyone in one way or another to express themselves, either physically with physical feats, or emotionally with expression and choreography. There's something for everyone there. So I'm not sure what other sport/art is like that.
Yeah, and that's, I think it's certainly a lot of what draws me to it, is that sort of the in-betweenness of skating as something that's between a sport and an art, and it's we're never going to be able to quite agree what it is, and we'll just endlessly debate it. But that's
exactly. But the debate is part of the fun, because everybody has an opinion. So add that to it as well.
Yeah. Exactly. So you have had this career where you were in the midst of skating at its height, at least in North America, this sort of this golden age from the mid 80s through the 90s of it being such a popular thing, and there being so much attention for skating. And then that's faded. And, I've heard a lot of different people's opinions about, why that is. But do you have a theory as to why, skating fell from this kind of cultural importance?
Oh gosh, I don't have the answers either. I do have opinions. And I think a lot of it was self-inflicted. And then a lot of it was just the times. Certainly in North America, 9/11 had a huge impact on everything. Then the entertainment world and what was available with the media and internet and social, like all of that has exploded. So there are so many options for our entertainment time, what we choose to watch. Before, everybody stopped to watch the Olympics, and now it's just one of many things that you can give your attention to. So it doesn't necessarily dominate the focus of a country anymore like it used to. And so that's more difficult in building stars or having that star moment is far more difficult today. And then the self-inflicted stuff, the fact that although, well, I know that there obviously was effort in changing the rules, and hundreds of thousands of hours and dollars have been spent to do that. But I'm not sure that the actual issue was addressed. And in dealing with the judging and dealing with cheating and I don't understand why there isn't zero tolerance for cheating in one way or another, whatever kind of cheating it was. I mean, after Salt Lake City, what needed to be addressed was how the judges were chosen and how the judges were educated, because of course we will always be subjective. We are a subjectively judged sport. That cannot change. So I think it's most important that the judges are educated and principled. They can have varied opinions, absolutely. And that's what makes it interesting. And, the taste from different countries is important. I mean, all of that is important for the development of our sport. But why aren't we more, and I don't know what the answer is. Should the judges be professional? Should they not represent countries? Things seem to clean up. I've been told, because I'm not a hockey fan, but I was told things have been cleaned up more in the NHL when the referees became professional. Why wasn't that avenue pursued? Why was someone who deliberately cheated in 2002 allowed back in after 2 or 3 years? Why? So those are the things that I feel haven't been addressed, have been skirted around, and we've lost that integrity, that respect from the general public. If they come in suspicious of how we conduct ourselves, then why would someone put their son or daughter into the sport? So those are just my opinions. I don't have answers. And it's a problem. It's certainly a problem in North America.
Yeah, and it's been this thing that we keep kind of talking about, and in some ways, it seems like at least my opinion, I guess, is that some of the lessons that we're trying to take from it and trying to sort of recapture what skating was, is that we then avoid changes in,
Yes,
in some of the ways that skating is promoted and talked about, and sort of the image that we want skaters to have. And if you the next in the mold of, even though that's not necessarily what's going to be popular now. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I find
a factor that I think is maybe not helpful.
I'm sorry, what did you say? I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, there's a nostalgia, I think, in some ways that I think not as helpful if it's focusing on just trying to make things look like the past rather than from a more analytical point of view.
Yeah, and I don't. I don't agree with trying to mold the image of skating, right? Or, sort of that kind of, oh, well, we have to do this to control what we look like, or not say something to control our perception. It's like you kind of want to push all of that away so that the skaters themselves can develop into who they want to be and what they want to be out there. And maybe because it was a more naive time, it was a little easier in the 80s and 90s. And also the audience was more easily engaged because, for example, in 84, when Torvill and Dean got their series of sixes, the world stopped because we were told somebody just accomplished perfection. We understood it. It was so completely understandable. They got perfect marks. And even though we're all human and we know perfection is impossible, this was the closest thing to perfection. They must be amazing. I need to see them, right? So when they go on tour and the tickets are sold and all of that, it's just like, it was so clean and obvious. And now a good mark is like, it's what does that mean? And the skaters should have their Torvill and Dean moment. The skaters of today, they deserve that moment. They're 30 years better. They're incredible what they do, but somehow the audience is alienated because it's just all a bunch of numbers.
Yeah.
It alienates me. That's not how I think. And I'm in it.
Well, and this is the part of the conversation I've had with a number of people, is the effort to then keep tweaking the system and saying, well, we think this is, we're tired of arms over the head, so no more bonus for that. Or we're, you can do cartwheels now. Everyone's doing a cartwheel. Like, it's we keep tweaking it, trying to find ways to add difficulty or add originality or anything. But it's so quickly then reverts to everyone doing the same thing. And
right. Yeah. Because you look at the rules and you go, okay, well, this is the way I'm going to get the most points. And so that's what I'm going to do. And then everybody else does it. And everybody is charging at the boards this year.
So I wanted to ask you what you thought about the interacting with the judges as the trend.
As a choreographer, I have used the boards, not competitively. I used them with Kurt Browning's Raglan, his clown. And he jumped into the boards or onto the boards. He happened to do it at a competition, and the judges happened to be sitting there. But that's not how the piece was originally choreographed. Although maybe it was, but it was professional. And I used the boards with Brian Boitano and some show numbers, and because the boards were there and you wanted to use them. And so I get that. And David Wilson told me that he actually did it competitively with, I've forgotten his skater now, in 94. And Sebastian Britten. And then it just sort of happened organically. And he ended against the boards or hanging off the boards in this, I think it was a big band number. And then the rule was put in the following year. That you couldn't touch the boards. So I don't know. Maybe it's all David's fault. And then it all came back. What do I think of it? I just think it's silly to copy. I think it's organically, it makes sense choreographically. Do whatever you want to do. But to do it just to do it, to me, is silly. So it really depends on the motivation behind anything, the intention behind anything. Because when you're creating something, choreographing something, an idea is an idea. It can be that same idea can either be awful or brilliant, depending on its intention and the execution and the environment that you're doing it in. So my answer.
And this is like, I think one of the ironies is that it seems like even though we have now so much more freedom when it comes to music, that skaters still continue to choose the same pieces over and over again. And we have this phenomenon. Was it always that
Oh,
way?
yeah. There were always workhorses.
Yeah.
Always. And frankly, I don't blame anybody for wanting to skate to Carmen. It's delicious. And I would do it over and over and over again to try and get it right.
Yeah.
But so then the goal is to make your audience forget they've ever seen it before. But if a skater really wants to skate to a certain piece of music, then I also think that desire should be supported, because then they own it, and then they are committed to it and apply themselves in a more powerful way. And I think that's a wonderful learning tool. It's so I'm kind of open to everything and anything, depending on the intention.
Would you support there being a separation between the artistic and the technical programs, or something moving in that direction? I've seen that suggested as one potential reform.
No, I don't know. I can't answer that question without a lot of thought, to really kind of see it through. But what instinctively, without giving it a lot of thought, what I would like to see, what I've always wanted to see, was that the short program be the short program. Give me all your requirements. Yes, this is my footwork sequence. Yes, these are my spins. Yes, these are my jumps. Boom. Mm-hmm. But the free program should have fewer requirements. It does a disservice to choreography to insist on a step sequence of a certain length of time or a certain pattern, because then everybody ends up looking the same one way or another. Okay, so here's now the 30 seconds where we get frantic and emotive and move our bodies around a real lot, whether the music asks for it or not. And that's where I feel in the free program, it should be more free. We don't need to see a step sequence twice. We don't need to see certain combinations and spins twice from the same skater and the same competition. So I think for me, it would be opening up the requirements for the free program. And so that the whole piece is about choreography, not just those 30 seconds. And you know what? The great programs do that, right? They do accomplish it. It's just so much more difficult for all of them to accomplish everything.
Yeah, almost working against the rules rather than with them to try to achieve that. Yeah. And that's something, one of the things that I find very interesting, and I was just at the European Championships and talking to a lot of coaches and some skaters there as well, and seeing just over and over again this hunger for there to be more room for creativity, more room for full expression, for more unique skaters, for more artistry, and just I think people really want it, and also is a lot of different ideas about how we might get there, and not really a consensus around what it would look like. But just over and over, though, I would hear people saying what they were looking for and what felt like was missing.
And what's wrong with each program looking completely different than the next? Yes, it's a challenge to judge, but at least everybody's uniqueness is celebrated in that way. We don't need to see absolutely every woman doing a Bielman. Maybe their body doesn't go that way. that shouldn't stop their competitive career. I mean, as an example, obviously jumps and all of that. I mean, competition is for youth, and just like Kurt was the first guy to land a quad, and now Ilya is the first guy to land a quad axel. I mean, that's brilliant and to be celebrated. And you don't ever want to squash that progress, but you also, as you said, don't want to squash the artistic progress. And in the perfect world, when you're looking at a program, you're not able to say, oh, this is where the footwork sequence starts. When you watch Tess and Scott or Gabby and Guillaume, I don't think you were sitting there thinking ever, oh, and that's this technical move and that's this technical requirement. That is the goal, for it to all be a creative vision in its entity.
Yeah, and the jumps feel like they're part of the choreography and the choreography.
And part of the music. And and to do what the music tells you to do. And maybe the music wants a fast and crazy footwork of just, Scott Hamilton feet instead of undulations.
It's funny because in some ways I think, you look at what the programs that are doing now, and then you go back and look. I just went back and watched recently the program that you did for Chen in 1996, and it's such a wonderful program. But you also look at programs from that time and think, wow, the footwork is so much easier. So much easier. All of that. Like easier is not necessarily worse, but it's just thinking, skill that's required for some of this, and it's interesting to think with is it does someone have better skating skills if you're seeing them do a tons of
you saw it in the short program.
Yeah,
show me in the short program. Let the free program be more free. But in terms of the skaters and the programs from the past, well, of course they're better skaters now. Of course the sport has progressed. Of course they're doing so much more and harder. And back in say Lu Chen's day, the focus was elsewhere. The focus wasn't on and if we were making that program today, it would be a different program. So you can't really judge the past with today's eyes in that way, because of the priorities of those days versus the priorities of what's going on today. But and we used to complain about the rules back then too. We had, especially in Paris, it seemed just so many requirements that we always said there's no time for the art, right? That's actually been a lifelong complaint, and there's always been a lifelong battle between, is it a sport and is it an art, and what's more important, and all of that. So that will just be the ongoing debate of figure skating too.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about pairs in particular, as a pair skater and as someone who's choreographed for pairs so much. It's my favorite discipline. I really enjoy it, but it's also something that I've noticed that it's the least popular discipline among skating fans and among skaters, perhaps. Like, it's the smallest discipline, tends to have the fewest crowds. But then there does also seem to be something that really appeals to the general audience about Paris. And I was thinking also about the fact that so many of the sort of pop culture versions of movies about skating or TV shows about skating are pair skaters, and about the sort of odd couple pair skater and all of that.
Yes.
I don't know,
why is it about that?
Why is there that difference? Yeah.
Why is it your favorite discipline?
Because I like that it's a combination of everything in a way. I like that you can tell such interesting stories with two people. I like the big elements because I think they lead to this sort of, tiny figure but fill up a huge ring. So those are the things that appeal to me about it. I understand when people say that it's it's boring to watch pairs because all the programs look the same, or that they're nervous because there are going to be a lot more mistakes in pairs, and that will be nervous to watch. So I understand why, but I feel like when I talk, I go to competitions, as a journalist, and the other journalists are like, I'm going to skip pairs, and I'm like,
oh, that's so sad. That's so sad to hear. Well, first of all, your description, the reasons you described for your own taste parallels Carolyn Taylor's, which is why she wanted to choreograph the pair. Well, I feel that the IJS system has done the most damage to pair skating. I think it's way, way harder to accomplish what I believe to be the essence of pair skating, which is, to me, the synergy of two bodies and figuring out what that is, whether it doesn't matter what the dynamic is between the two partners, but that synergy is what can be magical. And you can picture like a Gurdjieff and a Grinkov and that balletic perfection and delicate, ethereal expression, or you can, and there's certainly recent pairs who have hit that pinnacle. Eliona and Bruno at the Olympics, and Sui Han, for example, their performance. But it's because of the partnership. It's because of the physical, the emotional, the choreographic synergy. And I feel that now what the IJS has done inadvertently is it doesn't reward synergy. It doesn't reward unison and beautiful lines, like just simple, beautiful lines. It rewards more is more is more is more. And for example, a death spiral is a spiral. It gets tighter and tighter and tighter. I don't think it was ever intended to go around 3 times. Nobody wants to watch that last half turn of this pair struggling right to get that last half right of their 3 rotations, stuff like that. It's like that was never intended. It spirals down. It's not a continuum. It's not like a spin where you can hold extra rotations. It just doesn't make sense to me as a former pair skater, as a coach of pair skating, and now just being in the sport forever. So it's stuff like that. The lifts and all their complication, and grabbing things and flipping and flopping isn't necessarily beautiful.
Yeah.
And so, at least to my eye, and I do appreciate what they're doing, and I certainly know how hard it is. But I don't think it should be scary for the audience. I don't think you should be putting out a program that you can't skate clean almost every day. I think in singles or in pairs, you shouldn't. That's my training. It's just, you don't put out, if you can do it clean in practice over and over and over again, then you have a really good chance of doing it clean at the Olympics. There's no secret. It's about training. It's about constructing a program that's doable. And I don't think a lot of pair programs out there are even doable. And that's why there's so many crash and burn. And it's just scary. So that's my pair skating rant.
No, thank you. That's exactly, these are the things that trying to understand with where pairs can go, and trying to make it be something that is appealing to audiences and appealing to skaters, and not just, the thing that you do because you can't succeed in singles and you move to it, which that's to so many skaters who are maybe got into it that way and then are like, oh, I love it. I wish I had earlier, and have that positive experience, but not too many who started out or early on thought, I want to do
right. And that's so sad, because it really takes away what pair skating is all about, and that partnership, a true partnership in every sense, and then for the audience watching that journey. I think all pair skaters should train like ice dancers to learn each other's bodies and how they move and for unison. I think all novice, I think a novice, unison and that whole synergy should be the full focus in choreography and everything. Learning how to track two bodies, knowing where each other is at every moment, making sure they're both looking in the same direction, their heads are tilted in the same direction, their free legs are stretched out at the same height. All of those little details, that to me is the basis of pair skating. And then add on, and then create, and then start doing more complicated choreography. But if you can't do that, then there's never going to be that completeness, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's so obvious at the junior level. I think I was especially sometimes feel like the odd one out that I enjoy watching the junior pairs, and it's because I'm an adult pair skater and I'm learning things, and I'm I like watching some of the teams that are earlier in their process. Mm-hmm. You can see a little bit of the rough edges sometimes, and I think, oh, that's actually really interesting. I can see how they're trying to approach this, but it's so painful watching those teams try to do a 5 reverse lift, and you're just thinking
they don't even know how to do a basic overhead at this point. They're so fast tracked.
Learn their basics and feel comfortable with that, and then get to that level of complexity, and it would be safer and more pleasant to watch. But
yes, well, the safety is such a huge issue. And so you're right. I feel like there should be real boundaries around novice and then junior, so that it's a real true progression, that they're, as you said, not allowed to do the complexities that then happen in seniors. But everybody is in such a rush. And the thing with pair skating, like ice dancing, is you can't rush it. You can't rush a partnership. Once in a while, a partnership will magically stick. Like Saleh and Peltier were together for a very short time, but they both had pair experience, and so that happened very quickly. And there's always going to be anomalies, but usually it takes such a long time, and to have to figure out that dynamic between two people, to be able to go to the rink every day and train without drama, without risking your safety. I just think all of the demands of IJS and the complexity, I don't think they add up to anything much good. There are pairs who've worked through it and who have been brilliant. This is not a criticism of the pairs. This is a criticism of what the system has done to this discipline. The pairs, I think, are amazing that they do this.
I wanted to ask you also about professional shows and competitions, that sort of world as well, because it's something that has shifted so much over time, and that you've been part of doing shows now in Korea and in Spain and Canada and all of these sort of different places. And I was curious if you feel like how much that changes in different parts of the world and where audiences react similarly.
Yeah. Well, Spain was incredible because Javi obviously is a national hero, but they don't know skating as a nation. It's not a skating country. It's not a skating nation. And yet he sold out everywhere. I mean, we're talking 18,000 people in across Spain. And what was wonderful was that they fell in love with skating, but also they fell in love with all the aspects of skating. For example, in our first year, Yuka Sato was with us, and her glide is exquisite, and the audience got it. They completely fell in love with Yuka's glide, and yet they also fell in love with the Adagio team's bombastics. They loved that too. They loved everything in between, and they loved the music and the choreography and all of that expression, because in the art world, they're very sophisticated. And so they were able to bring their sophistication to our rink and fall in love with all the different aspects that we are. And so that was really exciting to make shows for them. I mean, the first show was a shot in the dark, and then we were able to see what they reacted to. And it was just such a joyous experience for David and I to see that they liked what we were making. And then we went back and made another one that was equally satisfying. And then COVID happened, and then things fell apart. And then our experience in Korea, or at least my first experience in Korea for Yuna's show, All That Skate, I just love finding the clue to what is entertaining in all the different kinds of areas. And we work closely with the producer because he obviously knows his audience. But our intention was to build a show around Yuna and what Yuna's strengths are, and invite her friends and create 2 hours of entertainment. And it was just hugely rewarding to go through that process. So, I mean, I love the collaboration. I love creating a product that makes people feel something, the arc of that. I mean, for me, it really is all about that visceral feeling and wanting to convey what we feel to the audience. We want them to feel what we feel and bring them in, or have them sit forward, depending on what it is that we're making.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned Yuka Sato too, because I feel like when I was first getting into watching skating and, as a kid in the 90s, I remember her programs from professional competitions in ways that, I don't remember, many others. And then getting to see her over all of these years develop as an artist and keep being able to do that, it's really a wonderful thing. I think, people like Kurt Browning also, just to be able to see somebody have this long professional career, it's so amazing. And I wish we had more opportunities to allow people to have those long careers.
Exactly. Yeah. And I agree with you. And in order to have a long career like that, you have to have your basics. You have to know how to skate. And Yuka is just such an example of the excellence of her glide. And as the years went by, she just got better at that. And same with Kurt, just being able to develop that, hone that, take it in different directions, play around with it. If you've got your base, then you've got the potential for that career. If you're fast tracking your technique and not really learning it, then it will leave you. at a much earlier age. I think that's just sort of a general. But I do wish that the greats of today had more opportunities. I mean, it's wonderful that skating is so popular in Asia, and that's just been fabulous for all the North Americans to be invited there, and then for shows like art on ice and everything that the Europeans are doing. So that is exciting and gives you hope, but we don't really have enough opportunities in North America right now, and it makes me sad for the skaters. It makes me sad for the creators, for the choreographers, and for all those people who deserve the same opportunities that I had.
Yeah, it's I 2 years ago I went to see the Stars on Ice in both the U.S. and Canada, and it was really interesting to compare the tours because this was a year where they were almost entirely separate casts, and it was really interesting to see in the Canadian tour. I preferred so much because there was a much wider variety of skaters that were part of it. That you had Kurt, you had Alyssa Cisney, you had Elvis Stoigo, you had this a lodge, this sort of interesting group of people. And then the US tour had wonderful skaters, but I think it was entirely the most recent Olympic team plus Marina Gassu, like the one person who was not a currently competitive skater. And they just didn't have the, the range and the expression or any of that, because that wasn't what they were focusing on developing up until this point. They were just not, it was just not the same kind of thing. And I found it's interesting.
Yeah, no, that is an interesting point. And just, I think, the fact that international skaters are going to bring different ideas, different approaches, different styles, and that's entertaining for the audience. We always just, we set out to make something entertaining and to explore different ideas and hopefully create something that moves an audience throughout the 2 hours. That's the goal. To move them, entertain them. And it's really interesting also to see how much better the skaters get with all that experience of performing in front of an audience, and that seasoning and just that understanding and connection and the comfort and that real connection with their audience. And that takes time. Some people are more, it's more innate, but for most, it just takes time, even for them, to really understand their own expression and then how to feel and let an audience in.
Just to wrap up, I'm curious what is next for you, if there are any projects that you're working on or anything that you wanted to share about.
Oh, I wish I could. I am working on 2 projects. Well, more than 2, actually. And I can't talk about any of them. They're premature to talk about, and also I don't want to jinx them.
They are.
But I am writing a lot.
Well, no, that's great. And I really appreciate, I think, the role that you're playing in keeping skating in this connection to the wider audience as well, that we're not only in our own little world talking to ourselves, but connecting and having this broader audience.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's important for talent on the ice to have avenues where they can express themselves, whatever that may be, and follow their own journeys.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Sandra.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again to Sandra for joining me in conversation. I've made a playlist of a few of her choreographies that's accessible on our YouTube page at The Future of Figure Skating. You can follow Sandra on Twitter and Instagram at Sandra Bezic.
Her website is smbcreative.ca. You can reach me with comments or suggestions for topics and people I should talk to by email at fsfuturepodcast@gmail.com or on Instagram and Twitter @futurefspodcast. If you appreciate our work, you can also support it with a tip jar at futureofigureskating.pinecast.co. Remember to subscribe to the Future Figure Skating on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts and share it with your friends.